Thank
So
you.
now we're recording. Yes, thank you. So we'll restart from the beginning. No, I'm kidding. All right. So first slide for the release notes. Opportunity product lookups. If you were ever in a situation where you were like, I need to create a custom object, or I have a custom object and I need to refer to an opportunity product, you couldn't do that in the past. Salesforce just would not let you select opportunity products or opportunity line items as it's known in the database. So if you needed to do, say, your own product schedules, couldn't do it. So with this release, you can now, well, do that. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but you can imagine I've seen some really crazy workarounds with saving the ID and creating visual force pages to make it look like it's related. No longer need to do that. So straight up, plain up, lookup fields to an opportunity product. Mobile forecasts for folks who are doing forecasting, specifically collaborative forecasting, which I believe is the only forecasting left in the Salesforce ecosystem. That is now going to be available on mobile. So people can take a look and make adjustments to their mobile forecast directly from their mobile and submit it. The other thing that I'm on here is the addition to be able to convert leads to person and business accounts. However, it does require you to use the Apex lead convert. So it's not, if you're using the standard lead conversion option, it's not an option for you. But if you use the Apex lead convert option, which is a menu setting, and you have to, well, do some Apex stuff, you can then set it up so lead will convert and convert it to a person and business account. And then onto community, Experience Cloud. There's only two things I'm going to bring up here, and they're kind of the same. And that is for people who are using sites, having people access a public site or access a community where they're not authenticating, meaning your users are not having to put in a username and password. There's going to be a big security change that is enforced in this release where guest users, unauthenticated users, will no longer have certain permissions, things like view all, modify all, delete. They're completely removed. The recommendation that I've been getting from people is if you have situations where you have guest users and you need to give them specific permissions, don't rely on the external profile for that guest. Use permission sets to create them. But if you are relying on them to be able to view data in your system, you're going to want to make sure that your permissions are up to date and set up to go, because otherwise you will experience a disruption when you are rolled over to Spring 21. People will go to your website and you might get errors. The page may not load. They may not see the information they're going for. So something to be aware of. All right. So on to the topic that I actually know things about it, and that's going to be all about flow. There's a whole bunch of flow stuff, and I have a lot of demos that are kind of broken in together. And instead of doing like, here's the bullet, here's the demo, I'm going to talk about them really quick, and then we'll go through and I'll show you the demos for basically the page. So the first one is, it's been rebranded. Again, it's no longer Lightning Flow. It's now just Salesforce Flow. So for all of us who have had mark materials and training materials using the word Lightning, we now have to go through and replace it all with Salesforce. One thing that's kind of big, and this goes into what I would consider we will eventually someday get rid of Process Builder, is the ability to access prior value for a record within a flow trigger. So for people who may not have seen past releases, you can now create flows that are run when a record gets saved. And for those, you can now have access to the prior record. So you can do things like if the prior field doesn't match the current field. And we'll take a look at that. The release notes called this partial run after flow. I think it's a kind of a weird name for it. It essentially is scheduled actions. So if you're familiar with Process Builder, you have these choices where you can have the action happen immediately when the record gets saved, or you can have it scheduled based off of a date or like X many hours or minutes from the time that the record was saved. You could do that now in Flow. technically we could have always done something similar to that with like the pause function, but it wasn't all that intuitive. And this method is a little bit more straightforward than that. And we'll take a look at an example of how that's set up. The other thing we'll take a look at is rich text emails. So this is for people who are sending emails through Flow and are not using an email alert. So you're not referencing a template or an email alert to send the email. You're literally building the who gets the email, what's in the subject line, and what's in the body of that email directly in the flow. Prior to this release, we were stuck with plain text. After this release, there is options for rich text, and we'll take a look at that too. This one I was going to have a demo for, and that's basically how Lightning components are handling when users go back to a previous screen. So imagine you have a screen that has a toggle on it, yes or no. And if your flow, eventually in the process, you go back to that same screen element, you didn't really have any control over what happens to the toggle. The default is that if a user said yes in the toggle, then when they came back to the screen, the toggle will still say yes. Now you have the option to be able to say, hey, I want the Lightning component to essentially refresh, so it goes back to the previous state when the user first went to that screen, or keep the value based on what the user previously selected. I will show you how that is set up, but I won't show you it working because I couldn't get it to work. I don't know why I couldn't get it to work. I've tried it upside down and left and right. I just couldn't get it to work. But I'll show you what the options are, and maybe it's just one of those strange, bizarre things in the particular release org I had. And then other things is things just like styling. So this really comes into play for more about the components that Salesforce provides, because you can put flow in a lot of different places. You had issues sometimes where the width of the component on the screen didn't always match where the flow was put. And so with this release, it's going to always take the full length of the container, regardless if it's in it's a single column or in a multi-column format. And then there's some syntax changes and being able to access complicated things and merge fields for loops. The last one about the loops is really about using things like an Apex complex setup, or taking something that came in through a user input on a screen. It's probably not something the majority of people are going to run into on a regular basis. So this is more for folks maybe have a dev on site or are working with a dev, and you are trying to build some declarative extension, but you're using Apex in the background. You're able to basically say Apex can define essentially a complex object that doesn't actually exist as an object in Salesforce. It will only exist in that code, and then reference it in the flow, and it will work. All right, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to take you into the dev screen. So Jen, did my screen switch over to Salesforce? Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to show you the prior value first. And prior value is pretty straightforward. So here's a decision where I say, hey, I want to check what the current stage is, and I want to see if it matches the previous stage. So there is a new item when you are running these record flows where you get this $ record, which normally refers to the record as it is when it goes in your flow. But now there's this prior option. So if I delete this, and if I scroll down under the global value section, you'll see we have the record, which in this circumstance is the opportunity because it's triggered based on when an opportunity is saved. And then I have record prior, which will also be the opportunities. So it works the same way, really, really simple. Before this, we would have to do some weird funky things like, let's go get the record before it's saved, because then we have the previous, don't have to deal with any of that mess now. It is just there, and it just works. All right. So partial. So there's a couple of funky things with this of how it works. You can see here, I have two kind of pathways for my start element. One is run immediately, and the other one is what I'm calling 0 hour 9 a.m., where I'm going to do two different things. One being immediately, and one essentially at whatever the schedule is. Um, the scheduled path is pretty simple. You can have multiple different paths here. And the setup of it is you give it a name, which in reality should really match up with what it's doing. So if it's going to run in 1 hour, it should probably be called run in 1 hour. But for joke's sakes, for a presentation, 098 just makes much more fun. And then you can pick the source for the time, and that is going to be pretty much any date on the record, or based off of when the record was saved. So that's that first option, when the opportunity is created or updated. So it works just like schedule actions do in Process Builder, where you define, hey, here's the date, and then what is it's going to be based off of. So right now I have for 0 hours after, but we could do things like days before a date, days after the date, hours before, hours the date. And then we can add new ones. Off to the left here, we just hit the plus sign and we'll just get a blank setup. I'm going to go delete my path. And when you do not have a path, this is what you should see. And that's this little add schedule path down below. If you do not see that, then you have the issue that, one, you need to have a criteria put in place on your flow trigger. So if you're one of the people like me that tends to try to do everything within one trigger for automation and have a whole bunch of decision elements, you have to have a criteria here, or you won't be presented with the option to say, hey, add a path. So if I flip this back to none and click done, you can see my path has disappeared. So the system won't even give me the option to add it. You have to come through here and say, hey, I got to put criteria in, and even if it's something that's always going to be true, like, hey, an opportunity has to have an account ID, so this will always result as true, you still have to have criteria in order to make that work. Rich text.
Brian, can I ask you
Yes,
two
Andy.
questions before you move on to the next piece there?
Yes, Andy.
Question number one. Do you think that is there a difference between a scheduled flow and having a scheduled path?
Yes.
And question number two, do you have any suggestions on debugging a time-based flow?
Great question. One of the things we'll be looking at on the next slide even is about doing a debug on a time-based flow, specifically a scheduled one. The other thing that we have is this works very much like scheduled actions are. So it will run with system permissions, but it's attached to the user who essentially kicked this off. So if you think about what's a scheduled action, if Jen was the one that saved the record, and we're going to say send an email in 7 days, it's queued in the system under Jen Bowen. And so we run into the exact same issues that we'll run into with time-based workflow rules or scheduled actions in Process Builder, where like if Jen wins the lottery and quits the job and her user is deactivated, none of those scheduled actions, or in this case, these delayed paths, will fire because they're tied to her as a user. But the kind of like the difference you asked, Andy, between this and say a scheduled flow, the flow in this circumstance doesn't finish. It gets essentially paused and queued out, which is the big thing. Whereas like a scheduled flow is just that it's scheduled. So depending on what you're trying to do in the use case, I usually recommend doing one or the other. If you have something where the time frame is going to be pretty short, like we're talking, hey, I need this to run in an hour, and it's truly based on this record being modified, then doing this makes a lot of sense. If it's along the lines of you close win the opportunity, and in 90 days you want to send an email out to the customer as kind of like a follow-up of, hey, how things are going and everything like that. I would actually probably suggest that you think about using a scheduled flow instead, because a 90-day period is a long time, and a lot can happen in 90 days. You can have turnover of people, and if it's something that's critical where you definitely want the action to happen, you don't want to deal with the fact that you suddenly lost the user who kicked off that process, and now none of your things are going to fire. So that's typically what I usually base it off of. If it's short term, this works fine. If it's long term, doing something scheduled is a little bit better. That answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
I also think about scheduled flows too in terms of batches. So if you have a lot of records that you want to pick up and do something with at a particular, evening or morning or whatever it is, I think of scheduled flows in that terms.
Well, the difference is this is only going to get queued when the record is edited.
Yeah.
Right, or created. And so if you have something like you want to do something to all accounts that haven't had a sale in 90 days.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good example of doing something with a scheduled flow where you wouldn't necessarily want to rely on this setup to try to do that reliably, because what happens if the record doesn't get edited and didn't meet the criteria at the time kickoff, right? So it really is use case based. But for most things that people are doing where it's just like, hey, I want to send an email after X many days, or I want to update a field or create a record within an hour or something like that, like here's a reminder task, this works pretty well. The other thing with just kind of less context, we saw a little bit about this in the let me get back up here. Where's the I got rid of it. In where it's did I do it up here? I did it up here. All right, I'm going to pretend that I know what I'm doing and I can remember. Here was stage. So one of the things you'll notice here is that we have this little icon with the $ record _ prior, and then it shows the greater than sign and the field name. So this is a styling change. It makes it a little bit easier to read than the curly brackets, pound, $, blah, 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 blah. And that shows up. It's still visible, like if you're referencing it in, say, like a formula or something like that. And if I click on this, it'll expose that type of setup. But instead of always showing this, we get the nice looking thing. I find this a little bit easier to read than the wonderful little curly brackets item. And then the icon will actually refer to things different in flow, like if it's a record versus a text template versus a variable. So it does make it a little bit easier to read this, especially if you're naming your gets records sensibly. Okay, so easier. All right, back to the PowerPoint. Oh no, not back to the PowerPoint. I forgot all about the rich text because Andy interrupted me and I forgot. So this is the standard send email action. And the big difference here is this rich text formatted body. There's a little toggle here for let us to include it, and then it'll let you pop something in here. The recommendation right now is to use a text template field for that. And for people who aren't familiar with text templates, it's a type of resource that gives us basically the access to the standard rich text functionality you would expect. And it will take in other references. So if I wanted to go ahead and I need to reference the record, there we go. If I wanted to put the field stage name into the template, I can do that and then bold it, underline it, make it italics, whatever, insert an image. It all works in the text template. And then the text template will get referenced down in this section. Where's the one I already have created? There we go. And that way you can add rich text to your system. You still have to have a standard body here, which is assumed it's going to be listed as plain text. I'm being lazy here and I'm using the same text template for both, though you may result in getting HTML then in your body if they're actually receiving it as plain text versus rich text. But that's the only thing you need to do to send a rich text email is hit the little toggle here and put in a text template for what you want to send. That's it. I still lean towards using email alerts because I like the concept of having an email template that is disassociated from the automation. So if someone needs to make a change, they can make a change to the email template without having to change the automation itself. But there may be circumstances where you don't need an email template and you just want to do it directly in the flow. I'm thinking something like emailing off to the admin when there's a problem to say, hey, there was a problem. Here's the information that was in the flow. That would be really tough to do in an email template and an email alert. Really easy to do here. All right. Now we're going to go back to PowerPoint. All right, so there's a bunch of different things in here regarding debugs, and I'm going to do my best to show it to you. It's a little funky, but it's kind of cool how it works. So one of the things there's a new way to handle when there is an error in your flow. You still get the email, but it's kind of cool what it's going to do, and I'll show it to you versus talk to you about it. Then there's some other things where they made the terms a little bit simpler to handle when you're talking about doing your debugs, more standardizations. And there's a new way to be able to do debug for your time-based actions, like Andy was talking, like a schedule flow. We'll do an example of that as well. For the other things, I'm going to come back to this because there's some other things that involved, and I rather just show the demo because I think the demos are fun. All right. So first things first. I'm going to show you something completely different because, oh, I do have it. Never mind, that's in the bottom. I'm going to force an error. So I have a flow here, which, yeah, there's multi-columns. You can ignore this. I did something to make this purposely error out. So I'm going to click next. And here's my wonderful message. We all love this, right? An unhandled fault has occurred. Please contact your system admin, which is great when I am the system admin and I don't know what's going on. So as I flip through, I got to go flip through and find my email address and wait for the email alert to come through. But when we get the email alert, there's this really nifty thing that will show up. Come on, send it. And if it doesn't work, I have one from last night that I will share. No, there we go, flow application. All right. So here's the email alert that we have. It looks very similar to what we're familiar with. We got the error message at the top.
Brian,
Yes.
don't see the email.
How about now?
Now we see it.
Now we see the email. Okay. I had paused the sharing so you wouldn't see my incredibly messy inbox with 400,000 emails. It looks very similar, but there's this new link right here to click to debug in the flow builder. And if I click this, it's going to take me into my org. It's going to take me to the flow, and it's going to show you what the path was until they got the error. And so I can see the error happened at the get records level, and I get the nice little X sign. And if I look off to the right, I can see that the error occurred here and what the error was. So for folks who are kind of familiar with Apex or Sockwell, this is a Sockwell statement, and it's basically what the get's doing. And what it's saying is that it couldn't find this column that I call joke in the system. So for whatever reason, the field joke can't be found on the opportunity. Okay, now I have a place to start. So if I come back to my screen and I go into Object Manager and look. About 9 times out of the 10, when you get this, hey, this column doesn't exist, it's usually because the field level security is wrong for that particular person. So if I hit set field level security, you can see it's not visible to anyone, right? That's a problem. So we'll make it visible. We'll close out my flow. Quick measure, we'll refresh the screen. And next I'll hit the flow again. Click next. And it worked. We're done. No error. Yay. So that was the only thing I could think of at the top of my head that would actually force an errored flow. But that's pretty neat that it will actually show you in the flow builder how far things going down. So if you have a really complicated flow that's got arrows all over the place, it can be really tough to read that side panel and follow along, where having that visual cue of where things are is really, really nice. And speaking of that, we have, if I find the right one, a new similar method to debug your time-based flows, specifically scheduled flows directly in. So this is one of those things that was really, really tough to do, where you basically had to run the flow, cross your fingers, hope there was no errors. If there was errors, hope that you got the debug log, and look through a really long mess of debugs to try to figure out what actually happened. But now we can click this button that says debug on the canvas, and it gives us the same type of options. We can have it roll back whatever happens in the flow. So for example, in our scheduled action, if we have something where it creates a whole bunch of records or updates records, it will debug it, but it won't actually make those changes in your system. It will roll it back, which is really nice to do if you're doing this in production, which we shouldn't be doing this in production. Or if you have data in Sandbox and you really don't feel like you want to go reset all your queries to be able to do this. And then we can also see query limits. So if we're doing things like gets within here, we can find out, well, how often are we doing this? I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And I can say, hey, look, nothing, nothing was found. So therefore nothing happened. So we will just flip this to be does not equal qualification. We'll save and we'll debug it again. There we go. So I can go through and I get the same thing where I get the nice little line to each of the elements. I can see what's happening. The sidebar will go through and it shows me, for example, here's the one record that it's referencing for the debug purpose. I can come and take a look at what the assignment was doing. I can take a look at the input. So I did a whole bunch of chatter and then I did a rollback. So if I went to this opportunity, we should see that the opportunity name didn't change, and we should see that the there's no chatter posts. So opportunity name hasn't changed, no chatter post. So the rollback's nice. If we go and say, hey, we're going to debug again, and I remove that as an option, now, actually, I just realized that it won't change the name because I never did an update on the record, but we should get a chatter post anyways. There we go. There's my chatter post. Yay! Demo partially worked. There we go. Andy, does that answer your earlier question with the whole debug stuff? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Cool.
I also really like, I just noticed this. I didn't notice this before. Maybe this was here before, but I really like, it's been a while since I've written a flow. I really like the little carrots in the debug too. So you can, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very nice.
That's very nice. Because, you know, if everything's good, I can like close it, and then expand it on what I need to actually see and care about. Nice real estate.
Yeah, it is.
Brian, did you say all this debug stuff is GA for this release?
Yes. I don't think any of it's beta.
Yes.
Now,
Awesome.
the one thing that is beta, and
Nice
I'm going to
segue.
jump ahead a little bit, is this multi-column. So we kind of saw a preview of that multi-column in this wonderful flow that I have. That's the wrong window. I now have way too many flows open up. Here we go. And I believe this is it. So, nope, that's my terrible, my toggle does not work. Where is it? Where's my flow? Is this my flow? I think this, yep. So this is beta, and as all things go with beta, it's not fully released yet, so therefore there will be problems. I'm not a big fan of using beta features in your production org, but it is a nice thing to kind of see where this is going and potentially just playing around with it in your sandbox, because it can make flow screens look a lot nicer without having to write a lightning component just to give you columns. So there is a new section called section. Over here on this as a screen component, you'll notice it does say the word beta. And to create a multi-column, it is really simple. You simply drag it and drop it. Let's do it above at the very top. And then we have our capabilities to configure that. So we can do full width, which is the default, or we can add columns. And every time we add a column, we have the option to say, well, how wide do you want that column in relationship to all the others that you have? So we can just keep adding them. And you'll notice as I do this, it automatically changes the width to be what it will be. So 12 is being full width. So we can say this is evenly broken out. Let me swap that out to 4. And you can see it automatically changed the width of the other columns, which is pretty nifty. Once you have your section in place, then it's just put your stuff in. So I'm going to have display text here. I'm going to do a date. Let's put some currency in there. Why not? We all like phone numbers. Pretty straightforward. I have not spent a lot of time with this to be able to see if there's any gotchas, but it is beta. So use with caution if you're going to use this, especially in your production order.
I have a somewhat unrelated comment to add. I've been using the beta for, well, at least 3 or 4 months. It's been pretty solid for me, but I know that the Flow team is spending a lot of time and research on enhancing the UI for screen flows. So if anyone is actually developing a lot of screen flows and would like to provide input, please contact me and I will put you in touch with the Flow product managers, because they are looking to speak to customers about what they're doing and what they would like to see in the screen UI design.
Andy, can you put your
Andy has
Rich text.
Sorry, Andy, do you want to put your contact information in the chat just in case? Thank you. And John?
Oh, I was just going to ask if anybody brought up pick lists being required, being an issue yet, or am I the first one to ever bring that one up?
Probably.
What do you mean pick lists being required, John?
Your choice on what that answer is.
Well, in Flow, trying to get a pick list to be required is a nightmare. I end up usually just doing decision points after every single screen because somebody forgot to input a pick list to loop it back and make them pick a selection. Yeah, I thought that was just a common issue that everybody complained about, and I thought that was the top of their priority list to get fixed.
Oh.
I just assumed based off of my own thoughts.
Is the
but
issue?
you could Twitter Sam Raynard or Alex and let them know it's an issue.
Okay. We'll see if that works.
Or you can spit a ticket with Salesforce support.
Okay.
And then you have to deal with support.
I was just waiting to see the life drain out of John's face. Okay.
Yeah, no.
So easier invocable actions. This really is a dev thing, but I think it's important because for admins to know this, what's now going to be possible and how we can extend flow out with it. So for those who don't know, an invocable action is essentially something that people can write with like Apex or a Lightning component and make it accessible within flow. So someone can write something that is code specific and make it accessible declaratively. And the change here is all about making it look and feel. So, for example, they can change what you see when you add that component to your screen and it pops up and you have to actually go through and put in the information. They can actually style that screen a lot simpler, where this wasn't an option before. And this opens up a lot of interesting things. Kevin Portman, who is a developer evangelist over at Salesforce, is actually looking at showing something similar to this in an upcoming, I think it's Code Live. I want to say it's a week from Thursday. So if you're curious, pop in. I may or may not be there. Moving back, null variables. And the last one, which is evaluate criteria. So these are things that we've talked about in the past where Salesforce was going to kind of enforce it at a certain release, and it's now have been delayed. So this one is coming out, I believe it's spring 22. And it's specifically for when you have something in your flow with nothing in it. For example, you grab a record and it has a lookup field in it and there's nothing in the lookup field, or you have a variable and there's nothing in the variable. Before some things will happen where it would be like an unhandled error. We'll just say, hey, you're referencing something that doesn't actually have a value in it, and I'll throw in default. With this update, it will flip that, so it'll actually be read as null. So you can do a check to say, is this field null? Just like how we do for pretty much any other field where you're saying, hey, I want to see if this is blank or not. It now will work. The other one, it has to do with when the criteria is being evaluated, for example, in Process Builder, what value it's going to use. So this kind of confuses a lot of people, but I'll give you an example. You have a record that has a stage called qualification. It gets saved, it enters into a Process Builder. There's a criteria node that says, hey, stage is equal qualification. So therefore, I'm going to update the stage to be contracting. And then it goes to evaluate the next step where it says opportunity stage is contracting. Now, with our kind of thought process, the way we would think about it is, well, the stage is now contracting because it was just updated up here. So you would expect it to enter that node and go and do the criteria. But with this, it won't actually do it because it will evaluate the record as it was at the start of the process, now how it was as the process is being evaluated. Unless that process gets fired again, it won't reevaluate any updates to that record that was made. Probably for part of the reasons why I find it just as confusing as everyone else, it's been delayed to winter 22. So we have about a year to figure it out.
Quick question. Do you know, are those two things part of the release updates formerly known as critical updates? And if so, could we just pop in an org and show everyone where those critical updates now live?
They didn't list it as a critical update.
Oh, so you see where it says update and then it says postponed? So I figured out that update means like critical update.
Well, that was
which is now called release update.
Yeah.
I think in the org, if we go to home and then search
release updates.
So they changed this a few releases ago, that this is now what this looks like. So I'm wondering if the yeah, anything that's marked as an update then would be in here.
Mm-hmm. It's right. It's this one.
Yeah,
right
it's
here.
that one. Okay, cool. So for anyone that's concerned or worried or want to take a look at this, do this in a sandbox, utilize this release updates, get started button. If you click on that, Brian, it's really, really nice. It walks you through everything right here pretty nicely. So just a quick tip.
Okay.
Thanks.
And that means I'm going to stop sharing here because it's now your turn.
Oh, it's my turn.
Oh, no, that's the wrong
Well,
button.
it does look like there was a question that I missed. Jeff, if you're still on here, you were asking, did you say that the debug does not work with auto layout?
I did not say that, but I didn't test it.
And also, I think auto layout, or Jeff says, I think auto layout is still beta.
It is still beta. And there's a lot of things that doesn't work with auto layout. So for example, the pathing that we did today doesn't work with auto layout. There's another thing I found that doesn't work with auto layout that was added in this release. So if you're using auto layout and you go, well, why don't I see what Brian showed? It's because it's not supported yet. Again, I'm not a big proponent of using beta features for the exact reason that it's really difficult sometimes to figure out, well, what's actually working with what, because it's not fully baked, so to speak. Yeah, I'll have to test with auto layout and see if it works. My guess is it won't, but I don't know. While Jen's doing this, I'll go do a test and see if it.
Well, Jen's doing,
happens.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think it works either, though. I think you're right that it doesn't actually work. So, well, thank you so much, Brian. Definitely appreciate you walking through all the flow stuff. Really, I think, again, we've been hearing this for a little while. Flow is where a lot of the resources are going as far as automation goes. So transitioning or thinking about transitioning, or at least maybe working with Flow going forward for your automations, is definitely a good idea. There's so many resources out there to get started. And we typically talk a lot about Flow here in our group. So thank you so much for that. Okay. So I've got a couple of slides here. And again, I think I might bounce into demo. I might hold my demos till the end. I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was multi-factor authentication. So back in September, we had Kelly Walker from Salesforce actually come in and do a presentation on MFA. And now Salesforce, it's been a big thing in the community. They've been pushing it. You've probably seen the little welcome mat and jump screen, if you will, in Salesforce talking about MFA. They are going to begin requiring multi-factor authentication for all of their products. Salesforce will, starting in February of 2022. So what does this mean for you? Well, we're not going to talk about this a ton today because we could talk about this all day. It really means start tapping into some of the resources. So I've got lots of links on here. And again, this will be shared out. Trailhead, Journey to MFA, there's a quick guide. There's a Trailblazer community group. So something to start thinking about, something to start planning for, something to potentially turn on before February of 2022 and make sure that it's working for your org appropriately. One thing that I don't know, and maybe there is someone here that can help answer this question. I know that we use like single sign-on. So I'm not sure how this is going to affect us yet. I haven't dug into it yet, or if we're going to have to actually do some kind of other authentication for accessing our org. So lots of things to start thinking about and planning for there. Here's a big one that I found to be a really big deal because I was implementing cases for the first time in our org. And one thing with case management to point out is there is a critical update that is now being postponed to winter of 2022 regarding enforcing some changes with the way that email to case works. So anyone that's used email to case in the past is used to working with something called a reference ID. So that reference ID is actually embedded. It can be put in your subject line. It can be put in your actual case email. And as long as you have a reference ID, it will always log that email back to the case, the proper case within Salesforce. So they're changing the way that they're doing that with this new threading behavior for email to case. From what I understand, if you were using the threading behavior before, you can still use that. You can opt in to continue to still use it. But for anyone that has not been using it, like me, hi, you're going to be forced into this new threading behavior. And what exactly does that mean? They look at the email header and they use that email header data and information to be able to tie back any back and forth on an email to the corresponding case that you have in the org. So something to be super mindful of. Again, this is talked about in the Release Readiness Live group, and you can reference these other links to learn more about it. Let me just open up something else here. Okay. Not a ton with sales that I'm really talking about here as far as Sales Cloud goes, but one thing I wanted to mention, Brian showed us how we can use rich text and emails in Flow. We can also now start using Lightning email templates in email alerts. So Brian mentioned about liking to use email alerts. We only used to be able to use the classic email template previously, and now you can use Lightning email templates. So they're just closing that gap more and more with each release and utilizing the Lightning email templates. So exciting stuff for you to stop managing 2 different versions if you were, and maybe start being able to transition over into all Lightning email templates. One thing I did note when I was researching this was an idea on the Idea Exchange, and they stated with some caveats. Not really sure what that meant, but they definitely, definitely take a look at any help documentation regarding what those caveats are. It wasn't very clear to me, but something I wanted to mention to this group. For anyone that knows me, I love my Lightning reports and dashboards. So they are streamlining it a little bit more. They actually allow you now to do multi-select fields. We'll take a look at that in a demo. And then something they just happened to mention that I thought was huge was Report Builder got some performance enhancements. So if anyone knows, I actually tweeted about this. I took a timer and I got on the phone with the product manager and I showed them how slow Lightning Report Builder was when you were adding or removing columns. So with this release, I will say that it has definitely improved from my experience. I'm interested to know from your experience if you feel there is some improvement there. I like to think that I contribute to that performance enhancement by making a big stink about it, but we'll see how you feel about it if you feel that it's actually enhanced. Also, with reports, you could filter on URL parameters, and now we're able to do that with actual dashboards themselves. So it's kind of cool. I'll show you that in a demo shortly. You do have to understand a little bit of how to write a URL parameter or how to filter within the URL when you're working with reports and dashboards. But it's relatively simple once you get the hang of it. And the help documentation from the release is really nice. It walks you through exactly what each little character means. And if you're anyone like me, you sometimes need someone to break all that up for you. And also exporting reports, you can now get the details emailed to you in that XLSX format. So when you are opening it, you're not going to get the warning that it's like in an old format. It's now been brought up to speed with that current format. So I have that screenshot here. Well, let's take a look at the demo. I'm like Brian, I like demos. So let me just pop into my Salesforce org. And here I am logged in, and I'm just gonna scoot in a little bit on my reports tabs to show you how we can actually do the multi-select. So I'm gonna click into edit. So it comes from the fields panel. So when I open up my fields panel, I can start selecting items by holding down, I think it's shift and then clicking. And a Mac, it's a little bit different. But if I start grabbing contact owner information, you know, all this kind of stuff, great, great, great. Let's grab it. It's going to select everything for me. And then I can drag it in live demo, drag it. Hello. It's not dragging. Why aren't you? There it goes. Okay. What I like about this is when it works, you can actually see it's kind of faded, but you can see the ones that have the little green check mark means that they're being added, and the ones with like the little gray stop, you've already have that field on your report. So that's super nice because sometimes I've gone through this process and then it's not adding it and I'm like, oh duh, it's already there. So you can drag and drop this into anywhere within your columns if you wanted to stick it in the middle somewhere, or you can do it over here in your preview pane as well. So you can just drop it in and then it'll add all of those fields at once with this new drag and drop feature. Let's take a look at the next thing, which is the filter parameters for a dashboard. So I have this, my scenario isn't great, but I'm sure you can come up with some better scenarios for this. I have this campaign monitoring dashboard. Super exciting with all of my components on here, I'm sure. But I have this filter on this dashboard where I can see everything, which is my view now, or I can drill down into specific campaigns and just look at the metric associated to that specific campaign. So that's really nice for me if I'm working with a dashboard and I want to, you know, filter down on my own. But you can actually utilize this in a URL, you know, filter component, or rather adjusting the URL filters. So within a campaign, so I just navigated to my campaign record here, I have this button that I created of a URL. So this campaign monitoring button, if I was on this campaign working on it and I wanted to know what is my performance like, right? Specifically for this campaign, I can click this button and it's going to open up that, I did think of you, by the way, Odessa, sorry. It will open up the campaign monitoring dashboard. And as you can see, it applied that filter for the campaign that I was on. So if you can look in the URL right here, this ampersand and then FV0, that is the filter right here, and it says what the campaign name is there. So let's take a look at that from the background. So I'll show you that button that I created. So let's go into setup. Should have opened that up a little bit earlier. That's okay. And I'm going to go to my campaigns object.
Jen, do you
Yeah.
know if you have users who are flipping back and forth between Classic and Lightning, if this will work if they click it in Classic?
I don't know the answer to that question. I feel like that's a loaded question. Do you happen to know, Brian, if it will work in Classic?
No, but I'd be surprised if it does.
I would be surprised too. Also, why is anyone working in Classic anymore?
Do you really want me to answer that?
No. I'm going to go to the buttons, links, and actions. Here's the button I created, campaign monitoring. And then I'm just going to throw this into edit mode so it is a little bit easier to read, I think. And again, that URL, I essentially I ran the dashboard, right, with the all filter, and then this is what I added to it. I said this little ampersand and then VF0 equals, that's the first filter in your filtered dashboard, and then put in that campaign name there. So it's pulling it from the record, pushing it through my button, and giving me that exact filter that I need from a user standpoint. Makes it super simple. And again, check out that documentation on it, because it really nicely walks through if you have multiple filters or more complex filtering you want to do, how to update the URL parameters to meet your requirement. Okay, so back into PowerPoint. Let's see if I can do this. Just moving stuff around. I have so many screens. Okay. Perfect. Dynamic actions. So I did steal some slides from the Salesforce release readiness, but it's because they do such a nice job actually laying this out. And we're going to demo this as well here in just a second, but dynamic actions are GA now for some objects, custom objects, as well as the account, contact, lead, and opportunity. And it is now available in mobile as well. So there's a little bit of a process to convert your highlight panel to be able to utilize dynamic actions on your pages, but super simple. And we're gonna take a walk through that in just a second. And this is what it looks like just from a mobile capability as well. You actually have a little checkbox to check to enable it for your Salesforce mobile app as well. So just something to be aware of for anyone that uses mobile. Let's take a look at customizing for dynamic actions and what steps you have to take from an admin perspective. So remember that button we just looked at? Well, let's go to our Lightning record page. And now I just have to remember which one it was that, and I don't remember. I think it's this one, but I'm going to cheat. I'm going to go back to my campaign.
You don't think it was the most recent one you edited?
I don't know. Maybe. I think it's the one I didn't edit because I edited one to test it, and then there's one I didn't edit so that I didn't convert it ahead of time. But I like going to the record because then I know I'm going to click edit page and I'm going to know it's going to go to the page I want. So it's all good.
But a great example for having a best practice for naming conventions of your pages.
Definitely. All right, so here is my Lightning page. I'm going to click on the highlights panel here. And Salesforce is so nice to us because they actually added this little upgrade to dynamic actions beta button for us. So it makes it super simple. So let's say that I want that campaign monitoring button to only be available if the campaign is active. I don't want a campaign monitoring for anything that maybe we decided not to actually run. So I'm going to click this button. It's going to ask if I want to migrate what I currently have or start from scratch. I'm going to make it easy and migrate from what I currently have. This is starting with my existing page layout rather than starting all over. So we're going to click that. And then we are going to select the source for our dynamic action and click finish. So 2 clicks, and now I have the ability to set up visible buttons based on dynamic filtering. So if I click on my campaign monitoring button that I want to add my filter to, I'm going to click add filter. And then I actually want to have, I think it's called status. No, I don't remember. Status. And I'm going to say if the status is not equal to aborted, right? Then I want this button to show. So any other campaigns that have been actively running will have the button, and then any campaigns that are aborted will not have the button. So we're going to add that. We're going to click done. And just like any other, if you've ever used dynamic page layouts yet or component visibility, then we get our little eyeball here to say that there is some kind of filter for this dynamic action. So I'm going to click save. I'm going to activate this too, just to make sure that it's my org default. Okay, good. We're good. So going back to a campaign record, we're going to test this and make sure that Jen knows what she's doing. So here I am in this particular campaign. We can see that my status is completed, and therefore I have that campaign monitoring button available to me, right? But if we updated this status to test it out and say that this was aborted, we'll click save. That button should now be gone. Hooray! So no tricks up my sleeve. It is literally off the page. So really cool with your dynamic actions. I know that I love buttons on my pages. So now being able to control that when it's visible, if you're hitting a certain stage or a certain status and you want to be able to provide more action for someone to take or someone to do something with a button, this is a great new feature. All right, back to the slides. So speaking, I mentioned that was available in mobile, so something to check out. I couldn't demo mobile, but I have lots of things to talk about as far as mobile goes. First thing, I just wanted to point out that there is a new home available, beta in iOS. So if you have iOS devices, you can definitely check this out. The reason why I wanted to call this out was because it really does allow you to have a personalized mobile home experience. It's actually going to be configurable by the end users to really make it specific for them and their goals. And we can enable this beta feature, of course, for them. And another reason why I brought this up is because it's going to come for the rest of us, right? Like not only iOS usually gets the features first, but I assume following this is going to be our Android devices and hopefully be GA once they get through the beta portion. So a lot of people love their home pages. I'm excited that they're bringing that to mobile. They also made activity timeline generally available. I just wanted to show you what that looks like here. So on the page in your mobile, you'll see the recent activity kind of down at the bottom that you can then pull up and actually scroll through and interact with just like you would on the desktop as far as your activity timeline goes. So really quickly, you can view your events, your tasks, everything that you're used to working with on your desktop, and really see that timeline information right there on your mobile. And I believe that this is automatically turned on too. Native scrolling. Basically, they say it loads faster. They say it's smoother scrolling. Copy paste is available now. So lots of good features here as far as making things a little more smooth when you're working on the mobile experience. Moving right along to our profiles, permissions, and security. So kind of a big change here is the read-only profile that some of us have known and loved for their whole careers is now essentially kind of going away. Apparently read-only is no longer just read-only, and Salesforce originally defined it as setting everything literally as read-only. You could view you could view certain items, but you couldn't actually do edit if you had this profile. So because of some of the product innovation that Salesforce has had, they started adding permissions to this read-only profile to actually give people edit access. So they realized it's really, the naming convention of it is really misleading because it's not really read-only anymore. So now you can actually convert this, for anyone that has an existing org, you can convert the read-only standard profile to a custom profile, and then, make changes to it to make it actually read-only or to fit whatever security requirements that you might have. So this is one of the updates, right? So that's going to be part of that release updates that Brian just showed us, used to be known as critical updates. So something you might want to research and take a look at. And then for any of those consultants out there working, or anyone working with a new Salesforce org, read-only profile is not even going to be there. So you're not even going to see it. They're not provisioning it any longer for any new orgs. I thought this one was interesting, creating more roles. So they have increased the role limit that you can have in your Salesforce, or you actually have to open up a case if you need to increase how many roles in your role hierarchy that you can have, or how many roles you can actually set up. Does anyone know what the current limit is of roles? And does anyone know, without Googling it, what they're increasing the limit to?
Roles.
Okay, 200, one for 200. So actually it's currently 500, which is a freaking ton, and they are increasing it to 5,000. All right, if you need 5,000 roles, you're doing it wrong. Definitely. Or then again, you have a really big org and everybody gets their own role. I'm not exactly sure.
If you have a customer community, everyone does get their own role, so that is
maybe that's why they're increasing it. I'm not used to working with that. Yeah, but it's a huge increase. So one thing that they did say is to keep in mind about performance. It's best to set up roles based on data access, really eliminating roles that aren't needed, because even though they're making this increase, they did kind of warn in the release notes that you might see some performance lag if you start utilizing tons and tons of roles. The other thing too that I wanted to point out was requiring the view all lookup record names permission. Okay, that's kind of a mouthful. They've decided, this was a critical update, but they've actually decided to change it to give us more flexibility from a user standpoint. So I actually pulled this one out of the release notes because it was super hard to explain, but let me just go through this. So you know how on a page layout typically anyone can see who the account owner is. Anyone can see who last modified the record or created the record. These are basically public, lookups to these user object or user records. Well, there is now, you can opt in and actually hide that information unless you have other specific permissions. So this is kind of what it looks like if it's hidden to someone. I'm very happy that they decided to let us opt into making this change. For me, that would have been a big deal. And I think for many people it would have been. So you'd actually have to, in order for someone, if you enable this feature and actually disable someone from being able to view the user information from the page, you'd have to start granting folks access to the permission of the user object in order to have those read capabilities and see the page as we normally are used to seeing it today. So just wanted to point that out. It was something they were going to force us into, but now they have ever so kindly decided to let us opt into this setting to suit our own needs. All right, let's see. I think this is one of the stragglers that we had in Classic that we didn't have in Lightning. So I'm really excited, and I know John, if he's still on the call, he's really excited to be able to manually share records in Lightning Experience. This is something I've been waiting for a long time, but now we have brought that into Lightning. And we are in beta currently, but what does this mean exactly? So in Classic, we used to have the ability, or we still have the ability, to share records one by one using a share button. And we didn't have this before in Lightning. We used to actually have to switch back to Classic to manually share something. So luckily they brought that to us in Lightning. Let's take a look at what this looks like. So this only works for, it kind of depends on your org settings. And my org is currently set to private. So if I go to my accounts, I've added the share button to the Lightning buttons, or the actions rather. So if I click on here, I now see this sharing capability. So I'm going to click share. It's going to pull up this nice little window. I can decide who I want to share this record to. So I'm going to share it to Astro, and then I can give Astro, read only, read write to my account, decide on cases, decide on opportunities. And now they have the capability to view that information, except for some reason, they couldn't make that change. No idea why. This is nice. Quick action errors that popped up. Interesting. So for some reason, live demo, but I think that you get the point. Definitely check it out in your sandbox. See if it makes sense for you to have your users manually share records in your org. Okay. Accounts as campaign members. So if you are more B2B, I think of this, we can now actually add accounts as campaign members. Previously, we used to create accounts with basically like shell contacts or leads to add those folks to a campaign in Salesforce. Well, now this beta feature allows you to add the accounts directly as campaign members. You do have to enable it because it's beta, but lots of different use cases there, especially if you're doing like fundraising, I think of with campaigns, and for nonprofits. So anything that if you're working directly with accounts, we can now add them to a campaign. Of course, with this being a beta feature, please make sure to test it out, run it through your sandbox. Brian doesn't turn it on until it's GA, but you can actually add, you'll see a new button now that will say add accounts rather than just add contacts, add leads, to actually add those account members. I believe that you can also do it with reports as well as list views, or maybe not yet in beta. But I'm sure that that's coming, considering they're telling us that it's going to behave the same way it does for leads and contacts. In-app learning and in-app guidance. So pretty exciting things as far as in-app items go. In-app learning is beta. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in your orgs, or when you are, I'm converted to Spring already, but when you are converted to Spring, you'll actually see now this new in-app learning Trailhead icon at the top of your screen. And if you open that, it pops it open. There's some nice admin ones here, which I think is great. But then you can actually assign specific Trailhead modules to learners. So you come in, you click new, you create the content that, you know, who this should be shared with. I'm not going to go through this process. It's very intuitive. You can assign it to specific users or groups, or to all of your users. So it's nice because it actually gives them that access to Trailhead learning right within their Salesforce org, if that's something that you're interested in doing. I believe this is also really beneficial for anyone who has the My Trailhead paid for add-on, because you can utilize this also to cultivate different learning paths to your end users and kind of push it out and make it super simple for them to get to the learning app. So something to be mindful there. And then one thing I'm really excited about that I haven't tested yet, I didn't have time to test this one, but you can actually add more engaging in-app guidance prompts as part of what we get available in our Sales Cloud, Service Cloud clouds, I guess, instances. You can add images, more types of images, where they are located. And you can even add, I don't know if you see this, but this is a GIF that is right inside that in-app learning experience. So you can do that for your users to quickly show them how to actually take action. I am a visual learner, so I was really excited to see this. One thing I will say that they are suggesting is, you know, make sure that if you are recording a GIF that you're really zoomed in, because those little in-app guidances are pretty small. So you want to make sure that it's not some teeny tiny thing someone has to read. There's also Snooze that's available. So this is kind of interesting. Instead of someone just Xing out of your in-app prompt, they can actually just snooze it to be like, oh, this is interesting. I want to know more about this. Remind me again in an hour. Remind me again, you know, later when it's more convenient. So a couple of things, just a couple more things on Lightning App Builder here. They have a lot of different ways that you can analyze the performance of your app. So right within your page layout, you can, there's a new little analyze button that you can click, and it'll pull up information and give you some recommendations to maybe make your page run better or smoother. So something to definitely check out where page loads are maybe a little bit slow. You can look at those suggestions and see what Salesforce might actually recommend for you. Same thing with mobile. So it really gives you tips on optimizing to make sure that your mobile pages are in tip-top shape. So just wanted to mention those two quick things. And the other thing I want to mention, I'm super excited about this. There is a new permission set helper app that is available to us on the App Exchange. So I'm just going to pull that up here. There's a link in the slide deck too, which will be shared with you. But it's pretty cool because it's right within the Salesforce org, so that you can compare and understand who has what permissions. That's always been a big thing for us within the Salesforce community, I think, to analyze if someone needs to be set up similar to another person. You can see all the things that that other person actually has access to, or to do a user comparison and see maybe Sally in your user group, you know, she doesn't see something, but Jimmy can. You can actually run this app and see all the different permissions that are assigned to those specific people. So it looks pretty cool for you to quickly install. Of course, install it in a sandbox first. And it sounds like there's more coming to this. So right now, this is the Salesforce Labs package that you can download and install. And it sounds like, yeah, they're going to be making improvements to it too. So something cool to definitely check out if you've got lots of different users with lots of different permissions and lots of different profiles, worth taking a look.
Is it just reporting, or can you take any actions from it?
I didn't download it, so I'm not sure if you can take action or if you says easily
Mostly
analyze.
I was interested in the ability to copy one's permissions to another's.
I don't think so, because I think it's just analyzing it, analyzing which users have access to what, comparing permissions across different users in a report view, and extract the report, which they have a typo in, but extract it. So if you ever use like data loader, you know, and you want to extract something and then maybe load it back in, that might be helpful. And then it just says reduce overhead in profile and permission management when switching user licenses. It does not sound like there's much as far as management within the app itself, but check it out. Prove me wrong. Teach me something new. Oh, it even says export report functionality for further manipulation. All right. This is my last thing. Either you're excited or sad. Territory, the original territory management is being retired. If this is your first time hearing this, that means this is probably your first user group meeting with us, because we have definitely talked about this before, but it's scheduled for retirement as of summer of 21. So this is your last warning. If anyone is using this feature, it is no longer going to be working, set to retire. They encourage you, of course, to use what is its replacement, which is that enterprise territory management. So definitely look at how you can migrate this over if you are using the current original territory management. And that's it from me. So thank you so much. Any questions from the group on anything I very quickly went through? I think I saw it.
Hey, Jen, is that in-app learning? I just went into one of my sandboxes and I don't see it there. Is there something to do to activate that?
Yeah, good question. So check out, so if you go into setup, it should, I don't think there's anything you have to necessarily enable, but let's go to setup. And then from here, if you just search in-app.
You need the hyphen. Is that what you're looking for?
Maybe.
If you don't if you don't put in dash hype or in dash app, you won't find it.
So it's
I
right.
run into that all the time.
Yeah. So it's right here, in-app guidance. It should be, there's no enabling to do for it because it is a GA thing. But it coming here and then actually adding some in-app guidance, it'll throw you into the guidance builder. So we've got a few minutes, so I can walk through this really quickly. So you can then choose what page you want your in-app guidance to be on. So this is what I actually just did in my org, where in my task tab, I created an in-app guidance, just a single prompt, right? For, and I did a floating one. You can say where it's positioned, all this kind of good stuff. You can give it a theme color if you're like super on branding, and then clicking next. You give it a title. So I just did this one for pinning list views. It's fun because you can do little, emojis if you want, all that kind of good stuff, and then put in whatever you want. And then this is where you can add the image. So I haven't done this yet, but you could upload, let's see if we can do something. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me get rid of this. Oh, 1 second. Here. It says drag file or upload. So if I put in Cody, see what it does. I have no idea. So it actually puts it into your files in Salesforce. There it went. Look at that image. You can add alternate text and edit buttons, all that kind of good stuff. That looks good. So I'm just going to say done. Okay. And then I'm not sure what happened.
You click done instead of save.
Oh, I clicked on it instead of save. Anyway, so if you click save like a smart person would,
The buttons shouldn't be right next to each other.
they shouldn't be right next to each other. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, that makes me so sad. Now I feel like I need to redo it.
Hey,
So,
Jen.
yeah.
Is that tied as well? Good to see this in action. Is that tied to the in-app learning as well, where you can tie in the Trailhead modules?
So there's two components of this really, and I'm sure Andy can probably do a better job at explaining it than I can, but from what I understand, there's the in-app guidance portion of this, which is free. It comes not free. It's part of your subscription to, Sales Cloud in this example. Save. Oh. But then there is actual My Trailhead, which allows you to have walkthroughs as well as create a Trailhead style learning path for your end users. And that's similar to this. They're like sister products, but this part is free where that is more paid.
So the in-app learning that you showed in this, that is part of My Trailhead, not part of general.
The in-app learning is actually part of this, but you can't create your own modules for it. You have to use the actual Salesforce Trailhead out-of-the-box modules if you were to point anyone to this in-app learning.
Can
Yeah,
you
I don't
customize
see that.
that in-app learning?
Are you on Spring yet?
Yeah, I went into one of my sandboxes where I'm on Spring.
That you're on Spring?
Yep. And I don't see it in there. So that
I
was
think this is updated for Spring, but I don't have that Trailhead icon.
Right. So it should just like mine just came up. Like it didn't Like I logged in once we went over to Spring and it was just there. This is something that's automatically enabled according to the release notes. So it should just be there. If you don't see it, I would probably open a case with Salesforce and ask, where is my learning path or in-app learning?
Or wake up really early Saturday morning and see if it's there.
Yeah, if you're not on Spring yet, you're not going to see it, right? So it just depends on when your org goes to Spring. Mine went a little early, but I think the next is this weekend. Yeah. And Andy, you asked if this can be customized. You can assign learning to users, which is what's down here, right? Where you can actually create like it's almost like a trail mix for them, right? If you're ever made a trail mix before, it's the same kind of idea, only it's within their learning path. I don't know much more other than that. I haven't played with it much.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could assign or not assign, but you know, determine which Trailhead modules showed up there in that.
You can
learning.
for your users. Yes, you can. And I think you can even say like, where is it located? Where am I going to locate this? Like in a specific app. So if it did my sales app and I only want to show it on my leads page, or one I really like is my reports page, I can assign that to all my users, and then whatever specific learning path you do. So if I put some modules in there about writing reports, that'll show up. And when they navigate to the reports tab, from what I understand, when they navigate to this reports tab like this, and then they click that button, it's going to be specific. Look, they even have some here related to that page specifically that I created. So Salesforce does it, you know, they already are providing you with some recommendations or with some learning modules, but you can create your own. So then I could create another set, a different set. Let's go to tasks, and it would change depending on, you know, what my learning was for that specific page. Interesting. Wonder if I drilled down into a contact record. I bet you could even do it at this point to create something special. Again, only using the Trailhead modules unless you've gotten out your checkbook and paid for my Trailhead.
Yeah, and Ryan, I just popped up in my release org, which is actually the first time I've opened a release org for Spring here, and I've got it too. So I didn't have to enable anything or turn anything on. It's there. So
I actually am a little
check.
sad that I can't turn it off, because for my users, I actually would like to turn it off. Because Trailhead, while it is so great for a admin, I find it very difficult for end users to follow and understand. So I have only shared with them a trail mix about reporting. That is as far as I've taken it so far, because everything within our org, it just personally is so customized that Trailhead just doesn't make sense. So that's my 2 cents about it, if anybody cares.
We care.
Oh, thanks.
I see a lot of people agreeing with you in the chat, Jen, and all I can say is I don't know what I can say. You got to let product managers know that there needs to be a switch to turn it on and off.
Yeah. I wish that they didn't. I'm just hoping that no one is going to pay attention and click that little button. And if they do, they can ask me about it, but I'm not going to cultivate anything to it probably. So any other questions? So we've got, you know, till the top of the hour. Diane, I love that people are clicking around in your org and they're going to click that button. My people don't do that. If I don't tell them to click something, they won't. They're afraid they're going to break it.
It's way up at the top. Does anyone ever use those icons?
I don't know. Favorite, yes. Everything else, no. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. But certainly, I think Brian's probably taking care of his,
He looks like a vacant chair.
yeah, he's probably taking care of his AAA that came to help him with the scar. Was there anything that anyone saw within the release notes that you've read that you're excited about that we didn't cover today? I'm just curious. Anything industry specific, John, for Financial Services Cloud? I've been kind of looking. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I bet it is. I haven't had a chance to look at anything on the FSC stuff because I've been nose deep in some other hurry up and wait projects. So I'm sure you're familiar with it.
I perused it really quickly and it was like, ooh, this would be nice. You guys also have more that you can do in Flow than we can.
Yeah.
More
yeah.
in different
Flow
components.
has really opened up quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm kind of excited about that because I've really abused Flow over the last year and made some real impressive magic happen. Kind of a trial by fire type of scenario, but I like it.
Sounds like you're going to be presenting.
Well, maybe. I still think, I can say this because Brian's not here, but I still think Process Builder has a place in the Salesforce world because I do try to help out as a consultant. Some admins are trying to be a little bit more hands-on, and I feel comfortable giving them a process builder that they can modify based off of changes in their business process than letting them change a flow that I spent 48 hours building. So I think as an end user, it's just a matter of elevating. Let's get rid of those workflow rules and we can have process builder for those admins that aren't quite comfortable dealing with flow yet. And then I can deal with their flow issues.
We had Terry from Terry Tidsbits on our Milwaukee user group last time, and I thought it was a really good presentation to encourage people to start using Flow, but I also understand what you're talking about, John.
Yeah.
New admins, I feel like the process builder really gives you some guardrails, right?
Yep.
Where Flow, you could really, you could really go to town.
They could. I think worst case scenario, they just become discouraged and decide that they'll just do it manually. But I imagine it's like you're going to a 10-year-old's birthday party at a bowling alley. You pop out those bumpers and now you're going to hit at least a pin. So feel comfortable with that, guys.
Definitely. Brian, is the car starting?
Car started, battery replaced, however the hood's no longer latching.
Awesome. Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
Yeah, except for she can't go anywhere.
Yeah, don't drive anywhere like that.
So she's going to try to drive slowly to the repair shop and hope they have an opening. Because my car doesn't start either, and she has to work at 5 in the morning. So, yeah.
Might be a day to, I mean, normally I'd say call an Uber, but I kind of feel uncomfortable saying that.
Not an option.
Yeah.
Guess she'll have to bike to work.
Also not an option.
At 5 in the morning.
Guess that's what I tell my
30
kid
degrees.
Anyway.
I did realize that I forgot to show the people stuff quick.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so unless there's an open question, I'll go back and show the lightning components refresh thingy.
Do it. I'm ready.
Share. So this is only for lightning components, but if you click one of the lightning components, you can tell it's one because of the lightning symbol. And then under the advanced section, there's now this revisited screen that gives you 2 options. One, which is use the values when the user last visited the screen, which is how it does now, or refresh the inputs, which basically it treats it as if the user just saw the screen for the first time. So that's
nice.
Your choices. You can pick that per lightning component, but I haven't gotten it to work. So I don't know why. There you go. End of demo.
Awesome.
Hey,
Well,
Brian.
Yes, Andy.
I have a flow question, unrelated but kind of related to what you were just talking about.
Okay.
I'm sure that you've built a flow, although I think Jen wanted to end this meeting, but I'm sure that you've built a flow where someone clicks the back button in a screen and all of the fields that they previously filled out are now empty.
Yeah.
How have you addressed that?
I
Because
removed
that's
the
kind of
back
what that
button
what
from this as an option.
he just cuts you off completely.
well, I mean that's an option.
I mean, I found very few flows where you need to go back in the flow by design.
Okay.
So for me, it's like, oh, you made a mistake. You need to go back, start over. Because for things just like you said,
the back button hasn't always been the issue for me. In a lot of cases, if somebody didn't fill out a required field, it runs it through and it erases most of the things that they tried to input already. So I'd be more interested in getting that fixed, because I can't fix PEBCAC errors. I can always pull that back button though.
Hey, John, I had that same issue. I just make the fields default to something. So like there's a yes, no checkbox, like a rich text. I have a rich text and then a yes, no.
Or create a value that's
default
called
to no.
none.
Yeah, create a value called none or TBD even I've done.
So I tackled it by saving the screen and then going back into the screen and setting the default value for each field to the screen dot component name. So that way, if they do go back or they go back through, once that variable's been set, it's set and it's tackled. So, but
how do you mean go back? I guess.
If you hit back, or if you're like John said, like someone submits something that isn't valid, and now your flow takes you back to that screen, all those fields would be wiped out. So I'm just setting the default value of the fields with the field itself. Does that make any sense? What I'm saying?
It sounds like you might need to do a presentation.
I was just wondering how others had tackled it.
It sounds like a potential, logic situation. The field is the field is the field is the field is the field.
Yeah, well, it works.
I think that works if you are, if you complete the screen and then you populate it with the screen. But otherwise, like other default values, if you try, like your initial default value wouldn't.
Well, it's null when you get into the screen, and then when you leave the screen, it's not null.
Yeah.
If someone filled it out, so there shouldn't really be a problem with it.
It should. It's supposed to say the previously entered value when you hit the next screen. That's always been the challenge when you've done where you had the flow loop back upon itself, and you wanted to have them like select different values, that it would always show what was the one that they previously had.
Yeah, you'd have to reassign all of those as variables. And I mean, I felt like I was taking too many steps when I first started doing that. And then I realized, no, that's the way it's supposed to be done, is you do have to meticulously look at every value and reassign it and set it if you have to loop back through.
I didn't realize I could share my screen. I could show you what I was talking about.
Well, we are up at the top of the hour. So if you don't mind, Andy, I have to jump to another meeting. If you don't mind sharing that in the success community, I think that'd be great. Or feel free to write a blog.
Fine.
Thank you all so much for joining us today, though. We appreciate it. We will see you next time.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you,
see you in
Jen.
the chat. I gotta go wash my hands. They smell like WD-40 now.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Huzzah.
Bye-bye.